Our next presenter is Dr. Dominique Estival. Dominique has a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania and is now with the MARCS Institute here at, of course, Western Sydney University. And Dominique's topic this afternoon is called Communication in Aviation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dominique Estival.
I'm a linguist and also a flight instructor on small planes, this one. My research is on communication in aviation, that is, how pilots and air traffic controllers talk to each other over the radio. That form of communication is very codified because it is crucial to aviation safety. One statistic is that between 1976 and 2000, more than 1,100 passengers and crew lost their lives in accidents in which language played a role. But the impact of communication on aviation safety is greater than the accidents and the deaths that are reported in the media. Communication also affects efficiency. Repetitions causes delays, because only one person can speak at one time, requests for clarification increase radio congestion. For example, one of my students answered yes to a question instead of the required affirm, and the Canberra air traffic controller could not understand him, and so she asked him, say again. He said affirmative, she did not understand, and asked him again. During that time, no one else could be heard, even to transmit an emergency mayday call. As a passenger, you wouldn't want your flight to be circling over JFK because the air traffic controller did not understand what your pilot said. The international language of aviation is English, but that's not general or conversational English. It's a very specialized and codified form of the language. Pilots and air traffic controllers must communicate efficiently whether they are native speakers of English or not, and most are not native speakers of English. The latest figures from Boeing show that we will need 635,000 new pilots over the next 2 decades, and 40% will come from Asia. With my colleague, Brett Molesworth, a cognitive psychologist in aviation human factors at UNSW, we look at language-related communication problems. We've put real pilots in a flight simulator, that one, and we analyze what kind of errors they make and under what conditions. The goal is to improve training and to prevent miscommunications. Our research has already had some impact on ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is the body that produces the rules and regulations for aviation, including the phraseology. ICAO referred to our book, the cover is there, Aviation English, in their working papers. Our work also seems to have helped clarify the phraseology. Until last year, the word confirm had a confusing definition. That was, have I correctly received message such and such? That was confusing because air traffic controllers sometimes used confirm to make a correction, as we might in conversation. For instance, an Australian air traffic controller told an overseas pilot to descend to flight level 290, but the Thai pilot made a mistake and replied, descend to flight level 250. The air traffic controller should have corrected him by saying negative flight level 290, but instead he said confirm flight level 290. For the Thai pilot, confirm meant a question, but there was no question that made sense at that point. So all he could say was, what is it you want me to confirm? The definition of confirm is now, I request verification of message such and such, which removes the possible confusion. As far as I know, the problem with confirm has only been mentioned in our publications. On the industry side, we have developed project proposals with airlines such as Qantas. We have made several visits to the Sydney Tower and the air traffic controllers told us that they want more help. I ran a workshop at the conference of the International Civil Aviation English Association, which is a professional meeting for aviation English teachers, air traffic controllers, pilots, and regulators such as ICAO and CASA, the Australian Civil Aviation Safety Authority. Aviation English teachers use our book, and they wanted a cheaper version, and the publishers have just come out with a paperback version of the book. In Australia, CASA has included our work in the latest version of the training material they produce called Safety Behaviors. We have some impact on the media with an article in How Stuff Works, a popular internet science news website, in The Conversation, in newspapers like The Age, and on ABC Radio. Finally, our work is expanding cross-disciplinary collaborations across psychology, linguistics, aviation, and engineering. With a commercial partner, we are developing a mobile app for aviation English training for both native and non-native English student pilots.
Thank you very much, Dominique. Lucky, I suppose, that they're still not communicating scientific discovery in Latin. Thank goodness for Galileo. A question from our judging panel. While they're thinking.
Yeah, sure, I'll ask a question.
Malcolm.
Only because you piqued my interest as something I know nothing about. So, you've mentioned that your book is referenced in a lot of other training manuals, instructions, and things like that. But how do the pilots learn this code? Is there an actual? Do they have to go to aviation English classes, or?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I actually teach people to communicate over the radio at the same time as they learn to fly. So that's a real difficult task. For pilots who come from overseas and who don't have English as a first language, some of them do go to English classes, but as I said, aviation English is not just conversational English. So just like the native English speakers, they learn communication at the same time as they learn to fly.
A question from the audience, please. Donald.
So I suppose we hear a lot about automation and robots.
Yes.
Is this possible that this might become removed as a problem at some point?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, but and it has been tried. I mean, there is something called data link, which automates interactions between pilots and air traffic controllers, and especially for weather and clearances. But the problem is that in case of an emergency or when something goes wrong, it's much easier to use voice and speech than it is to try to figure out which of the items on the menu would correspond to what you want to say. So in routine communication, automation helps, but in non-routine communication, you have to rely on spontaneous human interaction.
Okay, thank you very much, Dominique. Please join me in thanking Dominique